Today's first speaker is Tom McMakin. Tom is a partner in and co-founder of Orchard Holdings, a private equity firm focused on providing patient capital to growing companies. Prior to forming Orchard, Tom ran Great Harvest Bread Company, a Dillon-based retail company, now 150 stores operating in 35 states. And with that, I want to welcome Tom and look forward to his comments. Thank you, Tom.
Well, thank you for that warm introduction, Senator Tester, and thanks for using your convening power to bring us all into this room together. It's welcome, that's for sure. I've never been streamed live on the internet before. It feels kind of funny. I'll relate to you that you can actually feel it. Before I get started, I chose as my theme today, building great Montana companies. But before I get started, I'd like to just tell you a quick story that gives you a little bit of my background. Many years ago, my 15-year-old daughter says it was pre-Jurassic. I graduated from college, and I got it in my head I wanted to join the Peace Corps. And so I moved overseas to Central Africa and worked there for 2 years, building small businesses. And after I left the Peace Corps, I decided to walk across Africa. So I spent a year walking more than 1,000 miles across the continent. And this story has to do with that walk. I was about halfway across the continent when I was walking down a path in a densely forested area. Think of it as like the Bob Marshall, only different. And I met this fellow, and he said, hey, you want to go hunting? Well, I'm a hunter, and I said, yeah, absolutely. What are we hunting for? And he said, this afternoon I saw a giant snake out in the woods, and I'm wondering if you'd like tomorrow morning to go out and go hunting for me for this snake. And I said, that sounds like a plan. I spent the night, I got up the next day, and he brought with him a basket about this big that was very loosely woven, and inside of that basket was a little baby pig. And we walked about a mile outside of this little village, and we came to a clearing with a tree, and he put this basket with this pig at the base of the tree, and we climbed the tree and began to visit. And around noon or so, out of the forest came this 25-foot reticulated python, about that wide, and the snake circled this basket with the pig. You know where I'm going with this. And he slithered in between the slats and opened his great detachable jaws and swallowed this pig whole. And after about an hour or so, you could see the pig slowly working its way down inside of the snake. The snake decided to beat a hasty retreat and slithered out between the slats, but got stuck in those slats because it was engorged with this pig. Whereupon my buddy, he jumped out of the tree, took his machete, lopped off the head of the snake, and that night we had a great feast of barbecued snake and roast baby pig. So I tell you this story, building great Montana companies. I tell you this story because to me it illustrates a fundamental belief of mine, which is that the thing that binds us all together as human beings on this planet is that we are a clever species that is able to find opportunity and original ways to solve problems no matter where we are. Cleverness does not only reside in big cities, it is evenly distributed across this globe. And that's my theme today, which is that many people will tell you as an entrepreneur that the glass is half empty, that it's flat hard to grow a business here in Montana. But I think the glass is half full, and I'm going to make that argument today. People will tell you as an entrepreneur that this is a low population state. While we have fewer people in this state than a large suburban county outside of a big city, and that works against us. There's no marketplace. People will tell you that the tax structure in this state is all screwed up. You ever heard that before? That other states have 3 taxes, a sales tax, an income tax, a property tax, a three-legged stool, and we only have two of those legs, and that makes it hard to be an entrepreneur in this state. They'll tell you it's a low-growth state, that Montana has a GDP of 2 or 3% over the long haul, and that makes it hard to be an entrepreneur in this state. They'll tell you it's a low-income state, that the average income in this state is somewhere in the mid-$20,000 per year, and that Governing Magazine ranks as 48th in the country in terms of per capita income. And the comment you hear the most as people are filling your head full of negative self-talk is that we don't have access to capital in this state. There are no VC funds in this state. There's no way in which we can get access to risk capital to build our business. Well, I don't know about you, but I was walking around out there, and I think there are a whole bunch of people that are about to tell you that that's not true. But let's talk a little bit more about this. I'm making the argument that the glass is half full, that here in Montana, we have competitive advantage resident in this state that is unavailable to folks in other states. So I want to repeat that. We have available in this state competitive advantage that is unavailable to entrepreneurs in other states, that actually gives us a leg up over entrepreneurs in other states. It's tough being an entrepreneur. I had a friend down in Bozeman. I lived in Dillon for 10 years with Great Harvest, and then we moved up to Bozeman into the Gallatin Valley, and a friend of mine there was an entrepreneur, and he said, you know what defines an entrepreneur is waking up in the middle of the night and seeing blood dripping from the ceiling. I'm glad you laughed, because it really resonated with me too. I'm telling you that the glass is half full, and I have some real conviction around that. I've grown 2 businesses here in the state. The first was Great Harvest Bread Company, and I don't know if any of you know that story. Great Harvest was started by a couple, Pete and Laura Wakeman, in Great Falls, Montana. The first store was in Holiday Village over there, and the second store was right here in Kalispell. Pete and Laura then sold those 2 stores and moved down to Dillon to get in the franchising business. And actually, with all due respect, Senator Tester's description of where it is today actually falls short of where the company is. There are 220 Great Harvest stores in 40 states across the United States. The company has system-wide revenues of just a little north of $90 million. Just a wonderful Montana success story about building a national firm that just happens to be located in a small town of 5,000 people in southwest Montana. We sold that company, and I moved to Bozeman and began work with 2 private equity firms in San Francisco, middle market buyout firms. And then in a rash act of hubris, I said, how hard can it be to be in this private equity business? And with a partner, ran out and we raised, over the course of a couple years, $50 million, which we have put to work in a handful of companies across the country. I'm ashamed to stand before you today and say we have not put any money to work in any Montana companies, but one in Tennessee, one in Ohio, one in California, and one in Minnesota. But it is with that experience with these 2 companies that I make this argument with great conviction that there is competitive advantage resident in the state unavailable to other folks. So we all know that our population is hardworking and well-educated, but until you do business in other states, you don't really feel that in your bones. You talk to entrepreneurs in other states and they'll tell you people are their biggest problem. You know, when we advertised for a job at Great Harvest, we'd have 400 people applying for it, and we could pick 2 or 3 people that were absolutely stellar, unbelievable in terms of their work ethic, their commitment to the company, loyal to the company, well-educated. In Gallatin Valley, they say that 74% of the valley has some form of higher education, secondary education. That is fully twice the rate nationally. We're a well-educated workforce. And that workforce will work for entrepreneurs in this state. And that is a source of advantage that lots of folks in other places don't have. Let's just talk about pay. Let's just put it out on the table. Our starting wage at Great Harvest was $40,000 a year, and the pay range was between $40,000 and $120,000 a year. So that's a good wage. That's a good wage for Dillon. You can raise a family on that wage in Dillon and have a good life. Great Harvest put 25% down to the bottom line in terms of profit. So that's an EBITDA of 25%. If we had moved Great Harvest to Berkeley, California, and you could imagine doing that, right? You could imagine having a whole wheat bread company headquartered in Berkeley, California. We wouldn't have made a penny. Labor was our biggest cost, and we would have had to pay those folks twice as much in order to buy homes and have a good life there. The fact that our pay scale, and I'm not talking about paying people under what they're worth, the fact that our pay scale is not as inflated as a New York City or a Los Angeles is a source of competitive advantage for entrepreneurs in this state, unavailable to entrepreneurs elsewhere. Yeah, we have a low population. You remember that book a couple years back called 7 Degrees of Separation? The thesis was that we are 7 degrees separated from anybody that we want to meet on the globe. I think that's true, and I think in Montana, it's 1 or 2 degrees separated from anybody that we want to meet in this state. And this is a friendly state, and I've used this to my advantage as an entrepreneur. Knowledge is the foundation upon which great entrepreneurial success is built. And the fact is that I know somebody that knows somebody at Campgrounds of America in Billings. I know somebody that knows somebody at D.A. Davidson. I know somebody that knows somebody at Right Now Technologies in Bozeman. We are a richly connected state and a friendly state. You can call anyone up in this state and say, hey, I'm going to be in town. I'd like to buy a cup of coffee. I'm wondering if I could pick your brain about your particular business before I take the entrepreneurial leap. And I have never yet had someone in Montana say, no, I don't have time for someone else from Montana. It's a source of competitive advantage that you do not find in New York City. It's a sticky state. And by that I mean we have this wonderful Montana expatriate community across the country and across the globe. Wherever I go, whatever city I go to, I usually ask, do you know anybody that is from Montana? And someone will say, oh yeah, you know, actually our CFO went to MSU. Or our personnel person came from Miles City. There's an instant bond there. It's almost tribal, right? We're willing to help each other out. And expatriates that live elsewhere in the state oftentimes have the dream of moving back. Fully 6 out of 10 new residents in the state have some previous connection to this state. As entrepreneurs, we can use that expatriate community. You think that if you come from Los Angeles and you go to Chicago and say, hey, is there anyone from Los Angeles here? That they're going to feel some particular special bond to you? It's a source of advantage. We have low opportunity costs in this state. So when we lived in Dillon, Mary and I owned a house that today is worth about $150,000. Sort of a ranch-style house in the shadow of Western Montana College. If you were to take that house, airlift it to Palo Alto, not only would it be a little less well-built, but it would cost you $1.5 million. So for those of you thinking about taking the entrepreneurial leap, one of the things you ask yourself is, do I have the bank account sufficient to sort of carry myself for 1 or 2 years worth of risk? In Montana, that's numbered in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, whereas maybe in Palo Alto it's $1 million. So the opportunity cost is much lower, and that works into our advantage here in this state. The last thing I'll say is we have the wonderful opportunity to participate in this thing that I call a meta brand. And the meta brand is Montana. Right? So Montana is known across the United States and the world as a good thing. It's got a luminescent brand of its own, built over 200 years of history. And we as entrepreneurs have access to that meta brand that can redound to the benefit of our companies for free. That's an advantage that's unavailable elsewhere. Down in Bozeman, I've got a friend named Casey Walsh that owns a company called Sims Fishing. Wonderfully successful little company. They make waders and other fishing gear. What's their brand? What's the message that they're trying to communicate to consumers across the globe? Made of, by, and for people that really care about fly fishing, made in Montana. Or Dean and Hope Folkfort that own Wheat Montana. Well, that's even a little more obvious. They sell specialty grains in Walmarts across the country. And as you walk down that aisle, you see the specialty grain that says Wheat Montana. They're participating in this meta brand that's available to all of us and unavailable to entrepreneurs elsewhere. I'll give you a little example of this. When I was down at Great Harvest, I decided that I wanted to build the Great Harvest brand nationally. Here we were operating then in 35 different states. And I said, you know, we could get some national exposure, but you know, there was no way we could spend the money to do that. And so I thought, well, how can I do this on a guerrilla basis? And we had richly linked all of our stores together with an intranet. And so I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to fly to Seattle and talk to the folks at Microsoft and get them to launch an advertising campaign that features Great Harvest. And they did it. $15 million 4-ad advertising campaign all across the country. Touting how this little company in a rural place had used technology to link itself with the rest of the world. And one of the reasons that they did that is because of this Montana brand, right? If we had been located in Newark, New Jersey, perhaps the proposition would have been less compelling to the folks over there in Redmond. I will tell you that when tapping into this meta brand, be a little careful. It can have unexpected consequences. You know, they launched these 4 ads, and they were all across the country, and I was in 3 of those ads. And I went into a bar with my wife and Dylan, and I saw it up there on the TV, and no one noticed it. And I was feeling a little down, like, what's it take to get noticed in this state, much less the world? I called my buddy in New York, who's an advertising agency person, and he said, there's a lot of clutter out there, you know. It just goes with the territory. Don't worry, it's all good. And I was a little down in the dumps, and the next day, we have 2 kids, Mary and I, and we were having trouble getting our second kid. And so my wife, you just have to bear with me here a little bit. My wife sent me up to Barrett Memorial Hospital to get vet checked, and the doctor sent me into a little room with a sample cup, and I came out with my little paper bag, and I go up to the receptionist and give it to her a little sheepishly, and she goes, "Hey, aren't you the guy in that Microsoft commercial?" You know, I've been working in private equity for the last 10 years, and so I just want to say just 2 minutes on private equity. There is an old saw in this state that we do not have access to capital, and that is what keeps us from entrepreneurial success. Well, I'm here to report that I think it's just flat not true. There are 5,000 institutional investors across the United States. It's an increasingly competitive market. Capital is being deployed ever more efficiently. People are flying to Shanghai and Mumbai and Jerusalem to put money to work. The notion that they have to get on a plane and come to beautiful Kalispell is seeming like a hop, skip, and a jump these days. And I'll give you evidence of what I'm talking about. Highway 12 recently put money, they're an early stage technology investor out of Boise, into money into Missoula. The Riverside Company, $1 billion growth equity firm out of Cleveland, put money into a company in Belgrade last year. Of course, Right Now Technologies, one of our few public companies, was funded by Summit Partners out of Palo Alto. Booth Bay Capital out of Denver funded a lot of Dean and Hope's growth in Wheat Montana down in Three Forks. Here's some news that you didn't read in the newspaper. I have no idea why it wasn't reported. Warren Buffett recently put money into a company in Bozeman called Corbond. So, I mean, I guess my message is that in an increasingly flat world, capital will find a way to compelling opportunities, compelling entrepreneurs in rising tide markets with proven business models at good values. Capital will find us here. It's incumbent upon us to build the story that we can sell to the world. I want to end just on one last note. and that is, I believe in my heart and soul in what I call the not.com theory. The not.com theory goes something like this. Remember the dot-commers? They work like crazy, move to San Francisco, work like crazy in some startup, ignore their kids, maybe get divorced from their wife, certainly trash their life, and maybe, if the stars aligned, cash out with some big chunk of money and move to Montana where they could go fishing. Maybe they've got that wrong. Maybe all of us know that they've got that wrong, that our lives ought not to be in service of our business, but rather our businesses ought to be in service of our lives. That maybe the biggest competitive advantage that we have here in Montana is that we have our priorities straight. We're already here. Thank you, Senator Tester.